Is that okay with you guys? Tommy, can you guys hear me? And Nate? Uh-oh. And can you guys hear me? Sandy?
Yeah, I think their video's frozen on my screen.
Oh, your
Switch to
video
Tommy's
froze.
phone, if that's okay, because our well, it's just, I think it's the Wi-Fi.
There they go. You're unfroze now. Oh, now you're froze. Nope, you're unfroze.
Okay, so you're
Tommy's trying to call in on there we go.
Okay. Okay.
All right, that should be better. I apologize. It's the Wi-Fi is always a problem.
So now you guys are upside sideways.
Yeah, we're gonna put it on a stand.
Awesome. Thank you for figuring that out. I just love it when other people have problems and not just me.
All right, there we go.
You're rocking now. Awesome. Okay. I'm going to switch to, well, maybe I won't switch to speaker. If I switch to speaker, it might shift over to your other phone. Now, can you see the screen here?
Yes.
Yeah.
So do you see you have a blank square, or are you the only ones that you can see?
We can only see, we see you and then we see ourselves.
Okay. All right, because there's another space that Tommy is in. So I'm wondering if we should delete that.
Oh yeah, his computer. Yeah, you just log out real quick. He just closed the thing. Sorry, we'll log out of that.
Okay. Okay, yeah, two at a time.
There we go.
Okay.
Is that better?
Well, you're still there on my end. Let me see. I'll just stop your video. Can you see it, Lucretia? Oh, you guys are off road.
I can see it. I see both screens.
Yeah, Tommy, you're still in.
I see
somehow.
the top.
Just your head.
They're on the other one.
Yeah, we're trying to stop the one, but there, perfect. Okay, now I can switch to speaker view. Okay. Now that won't work either. I don't know why that does that. Okay, well, let's start over. Hi guys, and I met Nate years ago because he was my son's, I don't know what you call it, staff support, you know, when he was in Fort Wayne recovery. And we've kept in touch. And at one point, I asked Nate, could I please talk to your mom? Like, I just needed a mom group, right? And she was there for me. And then Tommy, I've met his mom. She lives in our community. So I've seen both a little bit of your backstories, but why don't you just share a little bit about, I think moms would love to know how long you were in addiction and how long you've been working in recovery, something like that. Share something about yourselves.
Sure. Go ahead. I'll start. So I'm Nate Moellering. Currently I am the community outreach director at Fort Wayne Recovery in Allendale. Fort Wayne Recovery is our outpatient facility and Allendale is our inpatient. When I met Michelle and her son, I was the center manager at Fort Wayne Recovery. That was about 3 years ago. So, you know, I was in active addiction from about 12 years old to 24. So about 12 years. So I started probably when I was 12, just kind of drinking alcohol with my friends at friends' houses. I was put on Adderall when I was 12 because they thought that I had ADHD, which turns out I was just a normal kid. Um, and so, you know, the Adderall didn't affect me like it would for somebody who had ADHD. So I got, you know, quite the buzz off of it. And quickly I figured out that if I took several days worth and saved them up and then took it, I felt really good. So even before I knew exactly what I was doing, I was abusing, you know, prescription medication. So, you know, one of my things early on for me was, you know, I always felt like I couldn't live up to my family standards. And that was always a point of shame for me. So I had a lot of shame and guilt growing up. And what I found out was when I took drugs and alcohol into my system, I no longer cared about what anybody else thought or anyone else's expectations. And I also figured that if I just decided to start hanging out with people that, you know, drank alcohol, smoked weed and everything like that, and stopped going to class and stopped doing my homework, that I couldn't fail because I chose to fail. So that's really kind of what got me started. Was it kind of took the pressure off me and made me feel okay about myself for the first time in my life. So fast forward to high school, you know, I played football. I was a decent football player. I ended up having 3 shoulder surgeries in high school. So I ended up getting prescribed Percocet. So I got addicted to prescription pain medication, among other things, you know, throughout high school. My grades were terrible. I was in trouble quite a bit with school, with the law. Somehow I managed to piece together a half decent football career. And I got a scholarship to go to the University of St. Francis here in Fort Wayne and play football there. And then I injured myself there, and the prescription drugs continued. And eventually what happened is, you know, they tightened down on the regulations for prescribing prescription drugs. So it was much harder to get them. I was cut off from my supply, and on the street, they were about twice what they used to be, sometimes 3 times as much marked up. So naturally, in about 2012, 2013, I moved to heroin. And then during that time, probably about 6 months after I started using heroin, I started using it in a needle, injecting it into my arm and other places. And wasn't long until I was putting every drug that I could get my hands on in a needle. Fast forward a little bit, you know, I lost 3 different football scholarships. I was homeless multiple times, homeless in Indianapolis, homeless in Fort Wayne. Went to probably, gosh, I don't know how many rehabs, you know. I went to private places. I went to community mental health places. I went to psych places. I was in St. Joe Behavioral 3 times, Parkview Behavioral once. Went to multiple detoxes, multiple outpatient programs. Was in and out of the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous, Celebrate Recovery, you name it. And then when I was 24, you know, that was about 22 is when fentanyl hit the streets pretty hard. And by the time I was 24, I had probably had 5 or 6 overdoses, been revived multiple times. And beginning of 2017, a lot of close friends of mine had died of overdoses or suicides or homicides by this point, just because this kind of life leads to that at a certain point. And I was living with my ex-girlfriend at the time. I was robbing her blind, and you know, my family didn't want me at their house either. They had changed the locks and everything. Told me if they saw me on property, they would call the police. And I was living in my car, and I was able to get back into her house one day, and I went in her bathroom and overdosed. They had to smash the door down to get to me. And then I AMA'd from the hospital, left against medical advice, went and got the same drugs again, went back to her house, overdosed the second time in 24 hours. But this time I locked the bedroom door and then the bedroom door. So they'd smashed down 2 more doors to get to me. It was the same group of first responders, and they were just like, "What are you doing?" We were just here, Nate, you know. And
Oh my goodness.
I was at the point where they said, if you do it a 3rd time, you're not going to make it. And I said, that's fine. I said, don't come. I said, don't waste your time. And then luckily there was a man who took an interest in me. His name was Mark Gerardo. He was a vice narcotics detective here in Fort Wayne.
Wow.
Had been on the department for multiple years. And he literally just came in. And if you ever hear our story, we did a story together. He'll say that something told him to go to the house that day. And he just sat down next to me and he was like, tell me what happened. And I thought he meant like what happened here. I said, well, you think you know what happened? And he said, no. He said, I want to know how you got right here to where you're at. And I said, okay.
Listen.
So yeah, he did. He listened. It was a human moment, you know, and he just put his arm around me and he, you know, and we talked for about 2 hours, and I told him my whole story. And that's when he said, Nate, I know someone who I think can help you. And that's when he introduced me to one of the owners and co-founders of Fort Wayne Recovery, Mickey Ashpool. And then at the time, Fort Wayne Recovery wasn't a thing. There wasn't much in Fort Wayne as far as treatment, or in Indiana or the Midwest in general. So I was on a plane the next day to Florida, and I went to a treatment center down there. And that's where I got into recovery. And then I moved back up here after 9 months. And then eventually came full circle, and I ended up working with Mickey to open Fort Wayne Recovery. And
Wow.
that's history for me.
What a story. Oh my gosh. Do you know how much hope that brings our moms?
Mhm.
I mean, you were in bad shape. I mean, oh my goodness. And actually, I can't believe that I had never heard that, because I've talked to your mom, and
Sure.
I can't imagine my son coming home to do that 2
Mhm.
times, not just once. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So do you feel like if that detective had come to your house that day, I mean, I know you don't really know the answer to that, but if he hadn't come to your house that day and really listened, without trying to fix you, without trying to, just from a human point of view,
Mhm.
connection,
Yeah.
do you think you would ever be here right now?
No, I mean, I think that everything happened the way that it was, meant to happen for a reason. I think things lined up in a way that, for a very long time, I denied the existence of a higher power. And looking back on my story after several years, I was able to see that everything happened the way that it was supposed to happen. And not everybody's story happens that way. And again, I can't explain why it was designed to happen that way, other than I believe that I was spared in order to be able to help others. That's really all that I know. But I do think that he made a huge impact in that moment, and it was a turning point for me. I think part of it too was, I always tell families and parents and loved ones that I went to treatment multiple times before this, and people say, "Well, do you consider those failures?" No, I believe that I learned what didn't work, and every time I went to treatment and I didn't stay sober, um, I still learned something. Like, whether I thought I was soaking it up or not, there
Mhm.
was things that to this day that I'll be sitting there and I'll pop into my head from a rehab I went to in like 2012. I'll be like, oh, that's what they're talking about. So it really was just a culmination of everything I had learned and all the experiences I had coming to kind of a climax right in that moment, and kind of creating almost the perfect storm, if you would.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, because sometimes moms will say, "Well, I've already sent him to 2. I can't
Right.
afford another one. I can't do this again."
Right.
And I never tell a mom what to do. Um, but I usually just ask questions. And how do you know the next time isn't going to be the time?
Yeah,
And
you don't.
that's and we don't, right? We don't. So for me personally, I was going to do it as often as it took. Like, I just was going to encourage that for our son as often as it took, right? So thank you so much, Nate, for sharing that story. And for you, it's probably like, yeah, I've told it a million times, no big deal. But to us, it's just so much hope. But also, you you tell it so openly. And
Mhm.
I guess the last question would be, at what point in your recovery were you able to, I guess for you, the risk isn't too great because you're already working in recovery, but so many people who are in recovery still won't share because the risk of being judged, or the risk of losing their job,
Mhm.
just the risk in general is too great. At what point was the risk worth it for you to share that?
Well, I mean, it became fairly early on for me, and mainly because I guess part of it was I wasn't as worried about what would happen to me. I just wanted other people to know that they had somebody that they could talk to that had been where they're at. For me, it was more about um, facing the stigma head on and making others feel comfortable, and knowing that there's people out there who are just like them. that's really what became important to me, you know. And I guess I've always kind of had the attitude, and not everybody has this attitude. That's okay. If people don't like me because of it, then that's their problem.
Yeah.
Um, it's
But you
just
had
like
a job. You had a job too, so you weren't like worried that word was going to get out and you would never get a job either.
well, honestly, I pretty much pretty early on, even before I was working in this industry, like, so my job before this was, you know, my first job in recovery was I was bussing tables. And I was pretty upfront with my boss at that time, and he understood. And I think part of the reason he gave me a chance was because he knew that I needed some help. And then eventually, that job, oddly enough, my career before this morphed into private security and then a bounty hunter, and private security. And I was still open with it at that point. But again, it was more just in the sense of wanting people to know that there's
Okay.
somebody out there who is just like them. And but again, everybody has different comfort level with that, and that's okay. You know, I
Yeah.
mean,
Right.
certain
No.
people feel they need to not tell anybody, and that's okay. As long as, I would always just say, it's important that you find somebody that you can tell, a group of people who understand, you know.
To connect, right.
Sure.
Yes. So, wow. Okay. Tommy, um, I know that your story is, because I've heard it, and it's probably in and out of recovery, um, very similar in some ways to Nate's. But if you had to share, um, when was the biggest aha moment for you that everybody is going to just walk away until you find your own way? Like, when did you finally choose recovery?
So, so again, my name is Tommy Streeter. I'm the community outreach coordinator for Fort Wayne Recovery in Allendale. And I mean, you said it, Michelle. Nate and I do have a very similar story. Like, I started getting high when I was 12 years old. Also, I did end up getting sober at 25. So it just, it started with smoking weed, and it just progressed. I also got injured playing football in high school and was given a bunch of prescription painkillers. And that eventually turned into an IV heroin addiction, very similar to Nate. The first time I went to treatment was in 2014. I was 21 years old. I went to this place in Goshen that, we didn't know this at the time, but it wasn't an actual treatment center. It was basically just a farmhouse out in the middle of nowhere in Goshen. And I was there for like 3 days. I had my cell phone, and I had somebody bring me a bag of heroin. And this was also on Sunday, which was visiting day. So my mom and dad were there, which that was the last thing on my mind. I could only think about how sick I was and what I was going to do about it. So, I had someone bring me this bag of heroin. I took it down to the basement. I did way too much of it, and I ended up overdosing. And my dad is the one who broke down that door and found me laying, my lifeless body laying on the ground. My mom and dad were both there. And, at the time, I thought, and I think my whole family thought, okay, that's going to be enough. Like, he's not ever going to do this again because of what just happened. He, shouldn't be alive. Back then, the paramedics didn't just carry Narcan like they do now. So there was no Narcan. The paramedics told my mom and dad that I was dead. And I ended up waking up for some reason. And I mean, I told myself, like, that was it. That was enough. That was the point, that I'm not ever going to go back to this again. Well, the mistake that I made there was, I thought like that event alone, that was just going to stop me from ever wanting to get high again. I didn't start working a program. I didn't complete treatment. I just went home and kind of did my own thing and thought that was going to last. And it only lasted for about a month. But I was getting high again after that. And that just, it progressed over time like it does. I went to treatment 6 or 7 more times after that. I was, homeless for the majority of my adult life because my mom and dad had kicked me out of their house multiple times after I stole, who knows how much money from them, thousands of dollars, I'm sure. Pretty much ruined every relationship and friendship that I had, lost every job that I had ever gotten, every car, everything. I had absolutely nothing. And even that was never really enough to make me stop. Multiple overdoses, at least 6 or 7 times. But the last time, what really, what stands out to me the most, I also had a hard time with the higher power. Some of my mom, she's got MS and a couple other health issues she was diagnosed with in 2012. So, you know, that combined with how terrible my life was, I kind of blamed God for that. And my mindset was, I don't know if there is a God or not, but if there is, I'm not very happy with him because my life is terrible and my mom is sick and, you know, all these other things. But the last time I went to treatment, I went down to Indy, and this was about 3 years ago. And I walked into this treatment center that I've been at 3 times before. I walked into my room and I just kind of like fell on the ground. And, you know, this was after the whole last year where I was, you know, I was starving, I was malnourished, I looked terrible, didn't have food. Like I had never been this emotionally, physically, mentally, and spiritually drained ever in my life. And so I walk into this room and I kind of just fell down, and I was like crawling to my bed, and I like pulled myself up onto my bed halfway. So I was on my knees basically. And everyone had always told me that when you pray, you should get down on your knees because it shows some action. You know, you're not just laying there praying. And I had never really tried to pray seriously or anything like that. But I just like, that was it. I finally was like, okay, I can't do this on my own. I've tried over and over and over again. Like I need help. You know, I had always told myself that I'm a heroin addict and I'm going to die a heroin addict. And I had accepted that. My mom had accepted that. My whole family had accepted it. They knew it was going to happen. I knew it was going to happen. And in that moment, I just decided, you know what, this is not how I want to die. I don't want to live like this anymore. And I asked for help. I asked God to help me. Didn't know exactly what God was or how that was going to work, but something just, you know, kind of changed overnight. You know, I woke up the next day. For one, I was able to fall asleep that night, which was a miracle in itself, considering how sick I was. But I just woke up the next day and I felt way better than I should have. So I stayed at that place for about 4 more days, and then I went to this other treatment center. And when I went to this other treatment center, this was, I think, my 7th or 8th time in treatment. It was a fairly new treatment center down in Indianapolis, and a lot of the people that were working there didn't have a lot of experience in this field. And me just being in treatment, you know, so many different times, I kind of did. I knew what treatment looked like. I knew or what it was supposed to look like, and so I would go to like the group sessions that we had, and I would always volunteer to read whatever needed to be read. I would always be one of the first people to answer the questions. And one day after we did that, there was a couple people that came up to me and they were like, hey, what you said really helped me out. Like you helped me understand this. And, you know, this old guy, I think he was like 65 years old. Like he came up to me and he was like, I never would have thought that I could learn something from someone who was 24 years old. And he gave me a hug. And that feeling kind of just, you know, it filled that void that I had always felt that I tried to fill with drugs. Like just that feeling of knowing that something that I did or said helped somebody, that kind of filled that void that I had felt my whole life. And I mean, ever since then, I've just kind of been chasing that feeling. You know, when I was 7 months sober after that treatment center, I was about 7 months sober. I got certified as a recovery coach. The classes were offered to me, so I took them. I ended up working at that treatment center that I was at for about a year. And it, you know, that just progressed into, you know, what I do now.
Wow. What a great story. And
Amen.
the parallels, so often I tell moms, like, you need to find your own identity and recapture your purpose, because when you do that, and you can make purpose your pain in some way, which is what you did, they recover too.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but getting there is really, really hard. Well, thank you for sharing that. There's so many parts of that wow, just can make me emotional. But I'd like to learn a little bit more about Fort Wayne recovery, and in general, you know, just moms have some questions about, you know, what they need to look for in recovery. So for their children. So one of the things I want to point out, though, is that you're in the Midwest. Our group here at Moms Letting Go are from other countries as well, like Canada, Australia. We have some in all different parts of the US too. And so some places, you know, some moms can't get to Fort Wayne recovery, but I'm going to ask some questions about Fort Wayne recovery, but some of them might be a little more general too. In that some moms are kind of adding questions in the Facebook feed too. So let me just, so at Fort Wayne Recovery, what levels of care do you help with? Do you have a separate detox facility? Am I correct?
Yeah, so our detox facility is in Auburn, which is just about 20 minutes north of Fort Wayne. And that's detoxing residential. So that's anybody that's coming in who, needs to come off the drugs safely, medically. Also gives them good separation from their drug of choice and things, and maybe some outside influences for a certain period of time, so that their body can, number one, heal, and number two, that their brain can adjust and kind of return to, their new normal, if you would, so that they can begin to receive some therapy. They do receive some therapy up there, but obviously when people are in detox and residential, it's what they pick up and hold on to is few and far between.
Right. So, and just to clarify to moms, like some drugs they don't have to detox from, and others they do, and then the period of time that they have to detox can vary depending on if it's alcohol. So, what is it true? Like certain drugs they can't detox or shouldn't try to detox on their own. Which ones are those?
Alcohol is one. Benzodiazepines, so that's your Xanax, your Ativan, your Librium, your Klonopin, your Valium. Those are the two that really you should not, from a medical standpoint, try to detox yourself, because you could have a seizure. It could be fatal potentially for someone trying to come off on their own. And then opiates, obviously, opiate withdrawal likely will not kill you. However, it's incredibly difficult to get to the opiate withdrawals on your own without any assistance. And what we see, the deadly part is typically where people come in and they get through maybe day 2, 3 on their own, their detox at home, and then they get so bad that they go and they try to use the same amount they were using 2, 3 days ago. And I mean, with the fentanyl out there,
Yeah, they'll die. Yeah.
That's what happened to me when I went to treatment that first time. I didn't know, it had been 2 or 3 days and I was so sick. My mindset, and I was 20 years old. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was like, I'm so sick right now. I need to do more than I would have done 3 days ago. And that's what, ended up almost taking my life.
Yeah. Thank you for explaining that, because I've heard that. I've heard that before, and it does always make me nervous when somebody first gets out of jail, because when they're in jail, they're abstaining and they think they, can use the same amount, and that's what happens. So, and then, so from detox, then they would come, and depending on what their drug of, they're using, substance they're using, then they would come into your program. And is that a PHP?
Yeah, so we have first they would be in detox, and then the second part of that is residential,
Residential?
which is just basically you're in the detox unit, but you're not receiving meds. And like you talked about, there are certain drugs like cocaine, methamphetamine, other amphetamines, where likely somebody may not have a physical sickness when they're coming off of it, but there is a severe psychological withdrawal that comes through. And we always recommend that people start in residential, mainly so that they can separate themselves from their drug of choice for at least a week or two, usually 2 weeks at a minimum, to kind of let their brain recalibrate and get through some of those initial severe cravings. The phenomena
Sure.
of craving starts. It's very hard for them to be stable in an outpatient environment. But the next level, yes, is partial hospitalization. And I always tell people the word everybody picks out is hospital. There's no hospital involved. That's what the insurance companies named it. Why, I don't know.
So,
So
but
our-
when they're
Mhm.
in if it's just to pause a second, if they're in residential then, and they're working with a doctor then to detox on some meds, when they come to residential, are they typically on like Suboxone for cravings, depending on what their drug of, what their substance was that they were using, or are they getting the Vivitrol shot? Is there anything that they give them to help with those cravings?
Yeah, I mean, typically, we try to utilize naltrexone and Vivitrol as much as possible. Typically at Fort Wayne Recovery, there are not many people that are on continued maintenance of methadone or buprenorphine. It's typically just Vivitrol and naltrexone if that's, you know, if that's what's deemed appropriate.
Okay. And so then when they go to residential, though, they continue to work with the psychiatrist or the doctor that's there. And
Yeah, we have a
and then-
psychiatrist at both facilities.
okay. So many moms, and the reason I'm kind of stepping through this is that so many
Mhm.
moms don't understand the difference between which is which. And so
Sure.
then from PHP, I mean residential, and um, so are there certain marks, milestones that they have to achieve before they move to PHP from residential?
PHP is more just getting them physically and mentally stable. So I mean, usually it's just a time period where we, you know, they have patient care meetings on a weekly basis with the director of nursing, the case manager, and a therapist to assess how they're progressing mentally, physically, emotionally, to make sure that they're stable and ready to move to the next level of care. So that's kind of the marker. It's very individualized
Okay.
with each person as much as possible.
And another thing about, you know, the inpatient setting is a lot of time, you know, people are having trouble with sleep and anxiety and depression. So, you know, me, for example, I was never prescribed anything when I was out using heroin. So, you know, there would be a doctor in there that I would meet with and a nurse practitioner, and they would, you know, prescribe me these new medications. And, you know, if you're in there, for, whether it's, you know, whether you're detoxing or not, you know, that residential stabilization period is very important to make sure that you're going to react well to any new meds that you may start.
Gotcha.
Especially if you're going to start like naltrexone or something. There are some people that have, you know, allergic reactions to them. So we just want to make sure that they're, you know, physically stable, especially before they move from residential to that outpatient PHP level of care.
Gotcha. Perfect. Okay. So then how long will they stay in PHP?
It varies. PHP stays are typically 4 to 6 weeks is typical in an ideal world.
Okay. And then they go into an IOP?
Yeah, so 4 to 6 weeks, partial hospitalization generally. And then intensive outpatient is anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks, ideally. And then from IOP, they go to just called OP, which is just outpatient, which only lasts about 30 to 45 days. When we're stepping someone from intensive outpatient to just outpatient, typically they've hit pretty much all the mile markers on their treatment plan that they've created with their therapist. They have a very good sober support system they've built up. They probably have, if they're doing 12-step meetings, they probably have a sponsor and a home group, something like that. You know, they've done most of their core curriculum work as well.
So do they stay physically in the same place from residential PHP to IOP? Or do
No,
they move?
so the location is, so they do detox and residential in the same building.
Oh, okay.
And so the difference between inpatient just simply is defined as you receive services where you sleep. Outpatient is simply defined as you receive services where you don't sleep. So residential and detox are, you know, inpatient, and then partial hospitalization, intensive outpatient are technically outpatient levels of care. So, but when they go to PHP or IOP or OP, we do have sober living, and that's that. So that kind of can be a continuation of residential. However, it is a much less intense version of residential. They have more freedoms and things like that.
Gotcha. And is your program faith-based?
No, we don't have a specific faith that we have our people subscribe to, but we are open to all faiths. And we highly encourage a spirituality aspect. We have people that come through that are Christian. We have people that come through that are Muslim, Buddhist, atheist, agnostic, all kinds of backgrounds.
And do you follow a 12-step program, or do you use like Smart Recovery? Which program do you use in your meeting?
Our clinical curriculum, you mean?
Yes, thank you.
It's okay. Yeah, it's matrix model. So it's a combination of many modalities of treatment. So we have, you know, CBT, DBT, we have EMDR for trauma therapy. We're heavy with that. We do MRT, which is a 12-step, but it's not a traditional 12-step. Is it other 12 steps in MRT, or is it 15 or something?
I think it's 12.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So MRT, there are 12 steps, but it's not like AA. So as far as 12 steps and smart recovery and celebrate recovery is all concerned, we highly encourage people to find outside support groups and get heavily involved in them. whether they choose to do, AA, NA, refuge recovery, which is like Buddhist recovery, smart recovery, celebrate recovery, which is a 12-step for Christians. Do something is what we say, and
Sure.
get a support network of people who you trust and you feel that you can rely on. And we have them practice that while they're in our program. So that way, when they step out the door, everybody has a plan, and then they step out. And if you haven't practiced that plan, likely, and it's not just for people that are in recovery, but anybody in general, right? If we don't practice our plans, we generally don't follow through with them.
So, yeah, and I always tell moms, establishing new habits
Oh my
takes
gosh.
time, even for us. So if you try something once, mom, and it doesn't work, or you just can't follow through with it, then don't give up. Try it again. Um, so what was that? Oh, so you talked about EMDR. So well, two questions first. Let me go back. From the time a person comes into detox and then leaves to go to sober living, what's your average time there between that? I know it's probably varies depending on the person, but could you give an average?
For the amount of time they spend at the inpatient facility,
Yeah, well, okay,
or
so
just the whole
maybe,
program?
um, well, does the total program include sober living arrangements too?
Since we offer them, yes, it does.
Oh,
The
okay.
whole time someone is if they're in our program, if they're in PHP, IOP, or OP, they can live in our sober living.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
but so the sober living isn't mandatory either. You can live at home, if you have a home, or, if you haven't totally destroyed your relationship with your parents like I did, and they're still willing to let you stay at home. But we do encourage sober living just for that extra peer support, the
Right.
extra accountability. But yeah, the inpatient phase is 21 to 28 days, and then Fort Wayne recovery can be 4 to 5 months.
So a total of 4 to 6 months generally is from, if you go from detox all the way to outpatient, and even after that, we don't even say graduate, we just say move to the alumni phase, because we have a
Okay.
pretty robust alumni program too.
Oh,
And
okay.
that's free and that's forever.
Yep.
Okay. So how often though does somebody just leave after 2 days or 2 weeks? Like, what happened to my son? I don't know. He was there a week or two. How often does that happen?
It varies, it happens, but I would say maybe, so what we try to do is we put up as many roadblocks as possible to keep someone from just walking out the door. Obviously, no one's held against their will. But, say that, someone has a loved one that they sent to us, and typically we're in pretty good contact with the family, and we keep them up to date on every step of the process as much as possible. And we would have them sign, obviously with their consent, they sign a release, the patient would.
Right.
So what we would do probably is sit down with the patient. They're saying, I'm leaving immediately. So, okay, hold on a second. Let's talk about this. Let's play the tape forward. Let's think about where we're going to go. And then we would get mom, dad, whoever on the phone and say, hey, Jimmy is talking about leaving. Would you be willing to get on the phone with him and talk to him? And we have kind of direct the family to keep their boundaries. So we do everything we can to block and somebody leaving is medical advice. But I would say, we have a completion rate, I think, of about like 75%. So I would say 25% of people at somewhere along the line leave before they're ready, whether it be them walking out on their own, or
Sure.
them being asked to leave and it's hard to get removed from our program. If you're removed from the program, it's usually because we've asked you to do something 5, 6, 7 times. You failed drug tests 5, 6, 7 times. We try to be as lenient as possible and treat everyone as an individual. So, if somebody fails a drug test, we typically approach them, and if they're like, hey, yeah, I messed up, here's what happened, we're
Right.
like, great, let's keep going. But if
Right.
somebody's like, no, screw you, I'm,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, you can't really do much about that. I do have moms in the group who have, taken their child someplace, not where you are, paid $35,000 for the first month, and the child left after 2 days and did
yeah,
just what you said. I'm not staying here, and they never got their money back. Like,
yeah.
how,
So
What do you do
We do,
about stuff like that?
well, we do a financial agreement before they come in, and everything's laid out in writing. It's a contract, and you get your money back on a per diem rate. So, say somebody comes in. So first of all, 1 month with us would never cost 35,000. First of all, um, inpatient or outpatient. And so what happens is, say somebody comes to Fort Wayne Recovery and pays 10,000 for a month of PHP, right? So what we would do is set up a contract that says, okay, if they come in for the intake and they do their biopsychosocial assessment and their intake and all their paperwork, then we say we keep like $1,000 or $2,000 for the intake and the fee and all that stuff, right? Get everything set up. Then every day after that, until a certain date, you will get a certain portion of your money back if they decide to leave. So then it's just counted, like I said, as a per diem rate. So like, and maybe it goes down like $500 or $400 a day for every day they're there at up to a certain point,
Right. That's great. And it just reminds moms who are watching this, whenever you're researching programs, that's a really good question to ask. Because, not all places are the same. And
Yeah, get things in writing.
yeah, right. That's true. But it's such an emotional time that usually, by the time they get their child there, it is, they're just so glad. They feel like they've just finally saved their lives. They aren't expecting their child to leave or they just don't expect it, and nor do they want it, of course. So, so are you an insurance only facility? Is that how Fort Wayne Recovery works?
Primarily, yes. I mean, we take mostly insurance policies. They're, through people's employers typically. Obviously, we do have an out-of-pocket rate that people can pay. But yes, primarily we're insurance. And, so like if say you had somebody reach out to us, they reach out to us, tell us who their loved one is. And then what they would do is send us their loved one's insurance information. And then we run a verification of benefits. So we actually contact the insurance company. And there's no obligation at that point. There's no fee. There's nothing hidden. It's literally, we just reach out, we get a spreadsheet of, what the insurance will and won't cover. And then based upon that, we have an accurate idea of what their deductible out-of-pocket maximum is, and have a pretty good idea too of what kind of levels of care that we'll be able to obtain. And then so what we do after that is we verify the benefits, and then we have the loved one, the individual, whoever it is, do what's called a pre-screen or a pre-assessment, which is like a 15-20 minute over the phone assessment. It just gives us a snapshot of what's going on. And that's pretty much our admission process.
I gotcha. Okay, great. Yeah, I remember those assessments. Oh boy. Yeah, you guys get a whole earful. Do you always get the truth though in those assessments?
No.
Rarely. Rarely do we get the whole truth.
Yeah. Mom tells us Jimmy's been drinking 2 fists a day. Jimmy says he has a couple beers like twice a week.
Yeah. Right. So it's interesting. So usually moms, you get more out of the moms than you do the client. Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you help clients well, 2 questions. So much of what I read is that trauma is such a huge impact on those who struggle with substance use disorder. And when that trauma is just so stuck, you use EMDR, but what other, so one, how prevalent do you see that in your clients? And 2, how do you treat that?
I mean, so trauma, when people think of trauma, they think of maybe like a scene in a war movie where there's, mortars going off and gunfire. Trauma can be anything that has a lasting impact on your brain. And it could be that your uncle or your father or your mother at 4 years old said, you'll never amount to anything. That counts as trauma. So almost everybody that comes in has some kind of trauma, and obviously to varying degrees. So we try to address that with every single person that comes in. Obviously, they have to be willing to go there. But it is something that is assessed fairly thoroughly. And, we do use EMDR. Pretty much all of our therapists are EMDR trained. Margaret Coates is our clinical director, and she trains people all around the state and all around the country for EMDR. Yeah,
Did you train me?
She could, yes, yes, she does
Really?
workshops all the time.
I thought you had to be a doctor.
No, I mean,
Okay.
I'm pretty sure, I mean, you may have to have some kind of licensure clinically. But I mean, I'm sure you could still take a training probably, and they'd be happy to educate you at least. I mean, you may want a licensure and maybe like an insurance policy if you're going to treat people. But,
Well, no,
you know,
I'm not. It's really not on my to-do list
no, I know, I'm just
right
giving you a
now.
hard
But
time. Yeah, so we address trauma, and we are also, our therapists are in the process of becoming RRT certified as well, which is another form of trauma therapy. Frustratingly, we had the training set up for pre-COVID, and it's all been shut down. We've been waiting for a year and a half to get the training back online.
You called
But
it RRT. What did you
yeah,
call it?
RRT, yeah.
What does that stand for?
I cannot remember. I apologize.
That's
I
all
get so
right.
many acronyms thrown at me on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's all right. I'll look it up. You know, I just want to hop back to insurance for a minute, because the
Sure.
other day I was listening to somebody talk about, how expensive recovery is. And she recommended that moms take out an insurance policy for their addicted loved ones, who are homeless, and, just so that they can get better care. What, I mean, what are your I know it's just your opinion, but what are your thoughts about that?
Well, it depends on what they're talking about as far as insurance. I mean, obviously, if your child is under the age of 26 and you have insurance through your employer or through a family member's employer,
No,
they should be
these are moms that are older. These are
okay.
older
Older
adults.
children, sure. That's tough to say because if you have the resources potentially, but some of the marketplace, because it would be a marketplace policy essentially. And a lot of them are basically Ambetter or MHS, at least in this part of the
Yeah.
country. And you have to be very careful because some of them don't have substance use disorder benefits. Or I know some people that spend like $800, $900 a month on a policy for their loved one, and they still may have an $8,000 deductible and a $16,000 out-of-pocket maximum. So it's all very, depends on what you can get.
Yeah.
And a lot of places are not in network with marketplace policies, and a lot of the policies don't have out-of-network benefits. So it depends. It would be worth doing some research in, but I mean, it could end up costing quite a bit of money, just as much as some places would be for a cash pay if you just.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I see what you're saying. We have a couple women here on the call. Anne or Lucretia, do either of you have any questions for Tommy or Nate?
I'm here, Michelle. This is Sandy
Oh.
Carmichael.
Hi,
Nate and
Sandy.
Tommy, hello.
Sandy.
I really want to give you guys a shout out because you just saved my son's life, honestly. I know he did a lot of hard work, but
He did.
without the phone call to Tommy, I don't know where he would be. And I just thank you. Your therapist, she was amazing, and she talked with us. She had meetings with us with Ryan, and she was just fabulous. And all of you are fabulous. And he continues to love you guys, and just, I don't know, I cannot say enough good things about the program. He had done a year of, or over a year of Celebrate Recovery. He had been sober for over a year. And so I think what you said, I believe it was Nate, that through that time, what he said when he started drinking again was, it was really hard to start drinking again because I knew what I shouldn't be doing. And I knew some things about recovery. And so not only was he, doing things that he knew he shouldn't be doing, but he was feeling guilty, and he knew that he wasn't in recovery. So there was more of a rub there. And yet his brain was so sick. And so thank you. He's still on a journey. He will always be on a journey. But I just think you guys are amazing. And so thank you very much. I cannot.
He needs that constant talking.
Yeah,
Well, thank you,
and
Sandy.
you're
We're-
right. He he needs that constant group surrounding him. And he told me, he said, Mom, I will have to go to these meetings the rest of my life because it's like oxygen and water. I just have to have it.
Yeah.
And so you've done
It's
tremendous
connection.
work with him.
Yeah. It's connection. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Sandy.
Sandy.
Yep. Love you guys.
We're all just very grateful to be in a position to try to help.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're alive. Yes. So I think there's a movie out right now called, is it Buying Bodies or
Body brokers. Body brokers.
Body Brokers? So what kind of questions should moms ask to ensure that they aren't working with one of my friends in this business too, if you call it this business, but this ministry is, she says, if you go, like if somebody's really sick and with a substance and they Google treatment centers, they will start putting these wrong ones in front of them. And then they have people calling them saying, hey, we'll fly you here. And then it's kind of like this whole setup, right? So what kind of questions can moms ask to ensure that that doesn't happen?
Yeah. So, I think one of the safest things that you could do, at least, especially if you're in this area, if you're in, northern Indiana or Indiana at all, we are happy to have people come meet us, sit down with us, see our facility, meet some of our staff members, make appropriate referrals if we're not the right treatment center. So, I think that's one thing. And if that's absolutely not an option, there's other questions that you can ask that Nate can. But, one of the things that we try to do is just, we're very open with people. Like if you want to come meet us, see who we are, what we're about, we always encourage that. And so, that could even be a question, like, can I come visit the facility? If you're in Indiana and you're talking to someone who wants to fly your kid to Florida or California, it's not necessary because there's options around here. There's no reason to go across the country. Plus, we believe that the family aspect of recovery is very important. We want the family to be involved. And if you're, a 5 or 6 hour plane flight away, that's kind of tough to do.
Right. And there's always Zoom, right?
Right.
And so, even if they're not even if they're an hour away and you can't get there, you can always Zoom to meet. And I think what you're saying is that they should have at least a willingness to show you a staff. And so obviously you're a dual diagnosis facility in that, you treat the mental health aspect as well as the addiction.
Yeah.
That's another really good question and to know.
Yeah, and I can even add to some of the stuff. One thing Tommy and I have experienced a lot of here, and we've worked very hard to clean it up in this area. Like if you go on Google, like you said, Michelle, and you type in Fort Wayne treatment, it'll say there's 25 treatment centers in Fort Wayne. And you'll say, well, there's 5 treatment centers on DuPont Road. My goodness. Well, if you drive to half those locations, it's an empty building. And if you call the number, it'll go to somebody in California and they'll say, hello, this is so-and-so with whatever treatment network. And you'll say, hey, I see your facility in Fort Wayne. Is it closed? They'll say, oh yeah, that facility's not open yet, but we have a sister facility that's open in California. And we'd be happy to send you out there. And they'll pay for your flight. And if they don't ask a lot of questions, then that's also a red flag. Because some of the things like, these body brokers, they get paid per head. So in other words, they get paid per person they put in treatment, right? So a lot of times they're not super concerned on whether your insurance company will take the policy or if they'll pay or not. They just want to get somebody in a bed so they can get paid. And they'll happy to stick you with the bill. They'll send you the bill afterwards if it doesn't pay. Or if they offer you money or offer your loved one money, it's important that you make sure that your loved one should not accept large sums of cash from anyone who's putting them in treatment. That's where they get into a lot of trouble. Is so say that you have a child and they say, okay, Jimmy, send me your insurance policy, and Jimmy will send them their insurance policy, or his mother will, and they will go to their list of treatment centers in California, Arizona, Colorado, wherever, Texas, and say, okay, I have this policy here. who wants it, and they'll say, I'll give you 4,000 for it, and I'll give you 6,000. And so then they'll call Jimmy and they'll say, hey, Jimmy, I got a place for you. And Jimmy says, well, I don't want to go to Texas, Bob. And Bob says, well, I'll give you $1,000 if you go do 30 days in this treatment center. And so then he says, okay, fine, I'll go to Texas. So then he pays him the money. He goes to Texas. Then he gets out of treatment. He gives $1,000. What do you think Jimmy's going to do? Jimmy's going to go get drunk or high, right? And then
Right.
so Jimmy calls Bob again when he runs out of money. And they do this over and over again until Jimmy's insurance company says, no more. Okay.
Wow.
You're cut off. And
Oh, that just
they use up
infuriates
their
me.
insurance benefits. So
Mhm.
it also, like Tommy said, reach out to somebody who may be in the insurance or in the treatment network. Ask questions. Hey, do you know this person? Google the place. Look at reviews. The problem is it's very difficult to tell over
Right.
the internet and over the phone who's who and what's what.
And
I mean, go ahead.
for moms in this group, we have a mom, Pam Lanhart, and she vets programs. And she's like, oh, I need one in the Midwest. So I gave her your number. I don't know if you guys ever connected because she's really busy. But yeah, we need more people like that, right?
Yeah, we do.
And so also Anne said use SAMHSA's helpline. I'm probably saying that wrong, but
Yeah.
yes, the helpline. I will say though, doesn't SAMHSA recommend like state programs too? And sometimes like state programs just cannot and do not give the same quality of care.
Yeah, they do their best, but luckily there are more treatment centers now that are taking Medicaid. In Indiana, at least, I can't speak for other parts of the country, but it is becoming much easier to get people placed who have Medicaid. And I think everyone would like to be able to take Medicaid. The problem is you have to be very large and open a very large facility in order to spread out the cost of treatment
Sure.
among many policies. So we would like to take it, but unfortunately right now we're just not big enough. But we can always help place people who do have Medicaid, at least in the state of Indiana. And the problem is Medicaid is state by state. So if you have Ohio Medicaid, you can't come to Indiana. You have Indiana Medicaid, you can't go to Ohio. So, but
Okay.
luckily those programs are becoming more and more available.
So
and better.
did you say you take Indiana Medicaid?
We do not.
No.
Not
Okay.
at this time. Not at this time.
Not at this time. Yeah. Is that something you hope to do?
Yeah, we do. We do hope to do that. We hope to
Oh.
build another facility at some point and hopefully take it. Yeah.
Oh, good. Good. Lucretia, did you have any questions? Go ahead.
Well, yeah, first of all, I do want to thank you, gentlemen, for taking the time to do this, and praise God for your recovery and the many people that you're able to help. I am in Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas, and that's where he got started too. Can you hear me?
You're breaking up.
Can
a
y'all
little
hear me?
bit.
Okay. Okay. Let me know if I cut out. Okay. Football injuries, and just mixing with the wrong people. You get out, you think you're an adult, first baby mama, he's got a daughter that's 8 now. He just turned 29. Just his 20s were just awful, like y'all's were, trying to find yourself, I guess, in your place. And I'm not for sure that he had any bad trauma. He had a couple of friends overdose and die. I mean, that's trauma in itself. But trying to find love in the wrong places, I guess, and trying to help these other 2 women. And he got sucked in himself, did meth, all kinds of opioids, just no telling what all he did. But in and out of county jail, they had his number. Finally, we couldn't deal with it. He wasn't allowed to be there at our home, and, he was homeless, and just all the same stories. Okay. So, and he took the rap for some stealing some firearms and money from us. And he's been in prison for the last year and a half. Okay. He went up before the commissioner of the parole board today. this morning. And so he called me right before I got on this call. And he thinks that it went well. He'll give his opinion before the parole board and they'll make their decision. But now that they've started opening up the restrictions, he has been moved to another unit to do their drug program. I'm not for sure what it is, but it's supposed to be a 6-month program. So if they grant him parole, then he will be in this program and probably leave whenever that happens. Okay. One of my questions is, do you have a payment plan? No, you just said that you don't do Medicaid yet, but do you accept, inmates that's out on parole?
Well, I mean, that would be on, that would basically be like a cash pay rate, probably, pay out of pocket.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, if you wanted to pay out of pocket, 'cause that's really the only way you
Yeah.
could do it. I mean, unfortunately, even if you had insurance, the insurance companies don't care. They would say, how long's he been in jail?
About a year and a half.
A year and a half. They would say he's been sober for a year and a half. He doesn't need treatment. Well, we know that's crap, right?
Well, that was going to
But-
be one of my other questions because abstaining is not recovery.
right.
So there's been
I agree.
no program. I know he's clean now,
Right.
and he looks the best that he's ever looked. And he's working out and, he loves the Lord and he's doing all of that stuff. And I've checked out a faith-based recovery place here in Arkansas that he could go to, which is a 6 months to a year program,
Sure.
which I think would be best for him. And I think a lot of people do relapse because when they get out of prison or out of their 10th program or whatever, they're
Yep.
just wild,
Right.
there's no structure, and they've got all this responsibility and they can't take it. And so they comfort themselves and they relapse. And I don't want that for him. He's been in other programs, 3 months, that doesn't do anything. A month doesn't do anything. So have you had questions like that for people that are out on parole, and what would be your insight in for a mom because we have several moms in this group that are in the same position. Their
Mhm.
child is just getting out of jail for some reason or another, and
I think what you're asking is like, what would they recommend? What have they seen?
Right.
What do they think would give Joshua the best hope
recovery.
for
Mhm.
out in civility? I don't know what you call that when you go,
Yeah.
when you transition. So what do you think, guys?
I mean, kind of what she talked about with the program that she found that's faith-based, that's 6 months to a year. I think that's a great place to start. And even when he's finished with that, I don't quite know super well how robust the network of sober living homes in Arkansas is. But, we recommend even when people get done with even if they do 6 months in our program, that they go to another sober living for at least another 6 months, sometimes another year. So the longer that he's receiving some kind of treatment service, some kind of accountability, the better. So, I mean, I think that program you talked about that's faith-based, that's 6 months to a year. I think that that's a great place for him to start as soon as he gets out. And then even once he's done with that, continue to look for other housing options that, they call them, there's halfway houses and there's 3/4 houses. Halfway
Yeah.
houses are places that have like curfews.
And
much
that's where
stricter.
he would have to go first
Sure.
before he
Okay.
went to this ministry program. It's called John 3:16. I've
Okay.
checked it out. I've called, I've talked to Pam, I've talked to people that their child have gone through it. So I've checked it out pretty well. It sounds really, really good. They have counselors there and different programs, work programs. So I feel really, really good about that.
It sounds
just
excellent.
trying to- It does. And we're stuck though, because I don't think that there's any really good halfway houses or transitional houses for him to go to. And he can't come to us. He
Well,
can't.
Lucretia, we
Anyway.
gotta stay in the now, right? Like if he gets through
Yeah.
that place for that long, he will own it. you'll want him to own it, and it'll
Right.
be up to him to find that. And trust me, if he's doing well, he's going to want it for himself, and he's going to be motivated to find that for himself too.
Right.
I got to believe
Right.
that. I don't know.
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
so, yeah, Tommy and
I
Nate.
do. I just didn't know if y'all had any,
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think you have a great plan, and I think, one of the things that helped Tommy and I out a lot, at least me in particular, was like, even when I was done with treatment, my family told me that I had to figure it out on my own still, so I mean, I think it would be okay that even if he completes that 6 month to a year Christian program, that he doesn't come live with you, I mean,
Oh, no,
yeah, and that's what I would
no,
encourage you to do that, because sometimes parents are like, well, he's doing really well, so we had to move back in. And I'm like, well, that's
no,
an easy place to get
no,
complacent. My
no.
mistake a lot of times too.
Right.
yeah.
One step at a time. Well, I
Absolutely.
appreciate you and appreciate your
Yeah, of course.
time here. Thank you.
Yeah, we're happy to help.
Are you guys on a hard stop because we went after 2:00?
No.
No, okay. So when I went to my Facebook and looked up questions, we were getting feedback from both places. I couldn't turn my sound off, so I can't go there. But if I have any other like follow-up questions, I can always like send them to you and then follow up with moms with answers. But is there anything that I didn't ask that moms should be particularly careful about, in your opinion, when they're searching for a recovery option for their child?
Go ahead, if you have anything.
Well, I think kind of like what we're doing here is always a great place to start. Like, have a conversation with whoever their outreach person is, or whoever's getting them into treatment. And if that person can't answer your questions, I would say I want to talk to somebody who can. And you want to see, you want to know kind of what modalities of treatment they're using. You could even ask them, I suppose, if they could send you an example of what kind of curriculum they're going to be doing, and also a daily schedule. Like, if they have a lot of different examples of things that they're going to be working on with their people in writing and things like, so for us, we have people in our sober living fill out a daily schedule every day that accounts for every hour of the day. Number one, because most of us, when we're out there drinking and getting high, we don't like, time is not a concept we understand. Tommy will tell you that I still struggle with the concept of time and being on time. But it helps too with people having a visual representation, saying, okay, where does all my time go in the day? And that's just one example of things we could send a family who's like, okay, I want to know what my child's going to be doing. And we could say, okay, here's a sheet where they're going to be filling out a schedule every day. Here's an overnight pass. Here is an example of a case management assignment. Here's an example of some of the assignments they'll be doing in their workbook. Make sure that they have a clinical program that seems like they've poured time and energy into, and not just bought some book online. That's a great place to start. Like I said, getting details about the program, and if the person you're talking to knows the program like the back of their hand, you can tell that they're there and they're working with the people on a daily basis. And they also understand the concepts, and there's some real concepts there. And it's also never bad, if you want to ask for a virtual tour. Like Tommy said, we have an open door policy. I mean, so if there's a parent in the area or a family member, whoever, or a client who says, I want to come see your facility before we admit, we're fine doing that. And if a place says no, it's a big red flag. And also look up their people, get up and find out who their staff members are, look up their clinical director. That's one thing we found, is just you Google somebody, if they have a long rap sheet, if there's a bunch of stories in the New York Times about them, embezzling money from treatment centers, it's probably a good place to stay away from, and you can find out a lot of things just through a simple Google search sometimes.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. And the hardest part too for these moms is like, if they're helping pay for the program, they want information going in, but at some point they have to hand it over to their child and say, I know I did with mine. When he came home a year later, he was telling me, what meetings he's going to go to and what he's going to do. And I said, whoa, I'm not going to police this. It's not my job. I'm not going to do that. And he said, you're right, to thyself you have to be true. But and so they have to own that, and I get it. But are there any words of encouragement you could give moms on how to let go? Because I'm all about how to let go without giving up, and with just continuing to love your child. So how do you empower them in that role?
Well, I mean, one thing we always talk about is number one, the best thing people can do for themselves is like what you're doing here. Get a group with like-minded people who are struggling through the same thing. So support groups are very important. Things like Al-Anon, even Code-Anon, like Codependence Anonymous meetings, things like that, where you just get support and learn boundaries, because boundaries are number one. I mean, that's, I'm sure you've learned that, Michelle. I mean,
Yeah.
if you don't have boundaries, because I mean, people are like, well, I could never do this to my child, but it,
Mm,
you're battling the disease, not your child. So the disease doesn't like structure, and it doesn't like boundaries. The only thing it knows is more. So it's okay to not allow your child to stay with you. It's okay not to pay for things outside of treatment. I'm not saying let your child starve, but let them kind of struggle on their own. That's okay. And when they do get into treatment, if you're paying for it, you have every right to want to be on a release and speak to a therapist. However, outside of family sessions and maybe getting some updates once in a while, you could just have your own boundary where you say, I know one of our therapists here talks about when he got into recovery. The only thing his mom would ask him when he got on the phone with her in the beginning, she said, if you can't tell me something you did today for your recovery, then we have nothing to talk about, and that's okay, because if he was like, I don't want to talk
that was
about
her
that.
boundary. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was her boundary, right? Yeah.
she'd be like, okay, well, we don't have anything to talk about today. I'll talk to you tomorrow. So find out what your boundaries are, and at some point you hope that they're going to take control like your son did and say, okay, I want to do this for me. But it's a process, and there's no perfect formula. That's the thing. And there's no great answer for everybody, for a universal answer for every parent watching. It's kind of just on an individual basis. But I would say also rely on the counselors where they're receiving treatment. Talk to people that are like yourself and Al-Anon or whatever kind of support groups they follow. It's a learn as you go thing, just like for those of us that are in recovery, right? We're going through the same journey, just different types of journeys in a way.
So true. Yep.
It's learn as you go. You learn what your boundaries are. You learn what works for you. But the most important thing is that you learn that your child doesn't control your happiness, and you can be happy and live your life despite what they decide to do.
Right. And that is what I love to help moms do. Find that joy. What is that outside of them? And just one of the things that we used to do is we asked to speak to the counselor with Ryan once a week for a long time. So that was one of our boundaries. But and one final question, and just put an idea in your head is, you say you treat the whole family, but who is there to facilitate and help the parents in their recovery find their own life, find their own identity and purpose outside of what their child's doing? Do you have somebody in place that actually works with them, or do you just refer them to meetings?
Well, I mean, the therapist of the client will work with them, but also we have a friends and family group that meets at Fort Wayne Recovery the second and fourth Sunday of every month at 5 p.m.
Okay.
And it's run by Jerry Gunkel and his wife Bonnie. Jerry's been in recovery for 30 years, and Bonnie's been an Al-Anon for 30 years.
Awesome.
And it's really kind of an introduction to Al-Anon and to other support groups. And they kind of take the lead in working with families, but also Tommy and myself work with the families a lot.
Good.
And we are happy to give them. So people will say, what can I do that's going to help determine if my child's going to be successful, my loved one's going to be successful or not? I said, you working on you.
Right.
That's the best thing you can do right there. You go to a meeting, you get a counselor. Everybody has stuff to work on. The healthier that, say if it's my child, the healthier that I get, the more likely it is that our relationship is going to get better,
Right.
and that their recovery is going to come first.
Right. Thank you. Yes, that's so important. I appreciate it. Well, thanks so much. Wow, this was really long. I was hoping we could keep it to an hour, but every single minute mattered. Is there any mom here who has a question? I don't want to cut you off, but I don't see anybody raising their hand, or there's nothing in the chat. So Thanks so much, guys. And yeah, I look forward to keeping in touch. And if there's any more questions coming in later, I'll get with you on that, on those. Okay.
Sounds great, Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you.
God bless. Take care.
See you. Bye.